Hello and welcome back to Psychology 303, the analysis of everyday behavior. I'm Dr. Williams and this lecture is over Chapter 16, Antecedent Control. And if you recall, antecedent controls or antecedent procedures are those in which we manipulate the prompts, the natural prompts and cues or motivating operations that occur before the ABCs of behavior ever happen. And so we've got some examples here. We've got reminders. We have the recycling bins that remind us to recycle. So the study space, there's a huge antecedent for study behavior, which is to set up a desk and a spot for studying that is only used for that purpose. And what happens is if you really respect that and you do all your studying in that location and you don't use that location for anything else, then you'll find that when you sit down at your desk, you will discover that you are more motivated and more ready to work. It's quite an effective intervention. So let me just briefly make a list of the kinds of antecedent control procedures that we might use. One is to present the discriminative stimulus for the desired behavior. So rather than simply eliminating a behavior, you want to decrease one behavior, increase the other. So you can remove the stimulus that prompts the undesired behavior and present a stimulus that tends to initiate a more desired behavior. We can also arrange establishing operations for the desired behavior while simultaneously establishing abolishing operations for the undesired behavior. And we can work with response effort. We can make the behavior that we would like to see them engage in easier to do and increase the response effort for the undesired behavior. So that's just sort of an overview. I'd like to start out this lecture by having you pause the PowerPoint and go to the assignments and lecture videos for Unit 6 and watch the lecture video 16A, which is an overview of antecedent interventions. And this is a really good, big, broad overview. And then come back and then we will talk a little bit more about the use of antecedent interventions. Okay, so now you're back. And so I want to talk a little bit about the goal of presenting the SD for a desired behavior. So one of the ways that we can increase the probability that we get the behavior that we want is if the cue for the desired behavior is not present, then that behavior may not actually occur. And if it's already present, but it's not very salient, you can add extra stimulus prompts. So that's one way you can make it more salient. You can increase its noticeability. So when you talk about stimuli that prompt behaviors, here's some good examples. So what are some good behaviors for studying, to prompt you to study? When I think of prompts for studying, I think of having a regular place to go study. A lot of students like the library. The library kind of prompts studying behavior for them. Once they sit down in the library, they actually are pretty good at getting their work done. Also, removing distractors. So we'll talk about those in a minute. So what are some good prompts for eating healthier? Well, making sure that those healthy foods are in the refrigerator waiting for you when you come home, already prepared, ready to go can be really helpful. What about some prompts for getting enough sleep? Well, let's look at some examples here. These are based on some research and some situations that I'm familiar with. In a study in 1975, Todd Risley and one of his students used the stimuli in the environment in a nursing home to encourage social interaction. The residents were avoiding coming out of their rooms. They weren't, even when they were, there were lots of tables sitting around. They would go to separate tables. So they rearranged the furniture so that they got rid of some of the tables so that there were fewer. People had to sit together. There was a little living room, and instead of just having everything pointing at the TV, they then rearranged the furniture so that the couches and the chairs were facing each other, and they got an improvement in social interaction. In 1988, Rogers and some of his colleagues put warnings about what happens to insurance coverage on the dashboard of company vehicles. And so certain behaviors would lead to a reduction in auto insurance coverage. And by putting that information on the dashboard, they were able to see individuals engage in those behaviors less. So things like speeding and not keeping both hands on the steering wheel. So they were able to reduce inappropriate behavior in company vehicles by putting up a reminder of what the consequences are. Also an antecedent, trying to deal with the behavior before it occurs. There's a restaurant in Roslyn, I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, called Village Pizza, and it's so popular that the wait time is really long for your pizza. And so they have put Trivial Pursuit cards out on all the tables so that they can encourage you to play games and test each other and to continue the interaction while you're waiting for a meal, so that people, A, don't leave and cancel their orders, and B, so that when people think about going to Roslyn Pizza, they remember the good pizza and they remember the Trivial Pursuit games, and so they go up and they still frequent the restaurant. So very clever use of distracting the customers with something fun to do until their food is ready. And then, of course, CWU has put recycle bins in the circ, so that next to the trash there are recycle locations for recycling different things that might come with your food. And there are now recycle bins in the dorms as well, to prompt people to engage in the appropriate response. Now, another thing you can do is remove the SD for the undesired behaviors. So if there is an SD for an undesired behavior, your task as an intervention specialist would be to figure out what it is and remove it or make it less salient. I've always recommended that in the dorms, we should have big recycle trash cans and very small garbage cans, so that people are more likely to throw their recyclables in the recycle container and preserve that small space for true trash. And I think that it would make it more salient, it would make it more noticeable, and it would encourage more recycling. What are some of the bad SDs that interfere with study behavior? A good example is your cell phone. Having your phone go off with a text or a phone call can be very distracting while you're studying. So putting your phone on airplane mode is a really good way to not be interrupted while you're studying. And so you remove that SD. You still have your phone with you. You can turn it back on when you're done. You can even reward yourself for every half hour of studying behavior with turning your phone back on and being able to do something with your phone for 5 minutes before you go back to study, and then turn it back onto airplane mode. What are some other bad SDs that interfere with eating healthier? Boy, I'll tell you, having the ice cream right there in the front of the freezer, bad idea. A lot of people will actually identify what those bad distractors are and remove them from their refrigerator. Get rid of them altogether. And bad SDs that interfere with getting enough sleep. Boy, let me tell you, that iPad in the bedroom, if you find a place, put your plug for your iPad in the kitchen. And when you go to bed, plug your iPad in, and then you won't be tempted to look on your iPad at Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is, so that you don't stimulate your brain with too much of that computerized blue light. All right. So you can also arrange for establishing operations for the desired behavior. So what could you do in advance to make the reinforcer more appealing? If you track your study days on your way to the test on a calendar in your kitchen, then your motivation to study will stay high. You can schedule time with a tutor or with a study partner in there as well and keep your motivation. If you've invested in a tutor or a study partner, then you're probably more likely to feel like you want to be ready for the test. And that doing well would make the reinforcer better because you actually worked harder to get there. If you want to buy healthier food, getting yourself a gift certificate to your favorite grocery store that you're working toward with your behavior modification project. That would be a great reinforcer for someone who's trying to eat more healthy, to get a little gift card for, $15 and wrap a little piece of paper around it that says buy veggies, and that would be your thing. That would be awesome. You can add 20 minutes of exercise in the mornings so that you'll be sleepier at the appropriate time of night. Remember that establishing operations have everything to do with deprivation and satiation. That's really important. You can also arrange for abolishing operations for the undesired behavior by making the reinforcer less desirable by doing something in advance. So, eating a healthy snack before you go to the movies to make it easier to skip the popcorn or the candy. That's a great idea. Having your dinner before you go to the grocery store so that you'll be less impulsive when you're shopping. Moving the TV or your tablet out of the bedroom to reduce the temptation to watch it until very late while you're in bed will help you go to sleep sooner. And if you give yourself enough time to spend on your iPad earlier in the evening, then you won't feel so compelled to use it later at night. And you can tune your radio to a classical music station to avoid getting into the lyrics and postponing studying. So you can spend some time listening to rock and roll, satiate yourself, and then tune the radio to a classical station. So you're replacing that behavior. Okay, so the last one I want to talk about is response effort. You can decrease the response effort for your desired behaviors by making doing the right thing easier to do than the undesirable, more impulsive alternative behavior. So if you are trying to improve your behavior, you can bring your books with you to school, and that makes finding a good study spot easier, and it makes it easier to study without distractions, especially if you're distracted a lot at home. Carpool lanes and carpool parking areas. It makes it easier and faster to get to work if you carpool than if you drive yourself. Making it easier to carpool so that you can go faster and spend less time on the road could be very useful. I think students who ride the bus from Yakima instead of commuting in their car, they avoid the parking fees and the parking nightmare, and it's faster and easier to get to school if you go on the shuttle bus that runs from Yakima to Ellensburg. So, and you can actually even use that time on the bus to listen to music or be on your phone, or all those behaviors that you worry about interfering with your studying behavior later. Purchasing easy to make lunch ingredients, buying apples and carrots and PB&J instead of really complicated ingredients means that you don't have to cook everything. You can make a BLT sandwich for lunch, but you've got to cook the bacon and you have to slice the tomato. And if you just throw PB&J and apples in a bag, then you're good to go. So, using simple ingredients, cooking healthy in advance, and then leaving it in the fridge. I'm trying to be more plant-based in my diet for health reasons. And so one of the things I do is if I'm going to go watch a TV show or whatever, I put brown rice into my rice cooker and cook the brown rice in advance. Then I put it in a Tupperware and I put it in the fridge. So when I come home, it's very easy for me to take a few vegetables and steam them and throw them on top of some brown rice. It makes everything so much faster and so much easier. So I'm decreasing the response effort for the healthy eating that I want to do. Now, at the same time, you can increase the response effort for undesired behaviors. So make the problem behavior harder to do. So by going to the library to study impulsive behaviors like snacking and video games and TV, you have to go home. There's a lot of effort in traveling from the library to get home to be impulsive to get a snack. So you're less likely to engage in those undesired behaviors. You can leave your cell phone in the car when you study and make social calls require a trip to the parking lot, then you're less likely to make a social phone call, right? If you don't have the half gallon of ice cream in the freezer, then you're probably not going to binge eat the ice cream. Even a small sweet treat would require that you put on your coat and go out to the car and drive to the grocery store. And that's very effortful. Even if you are going to finally give in and go to the grocery store, only buy a single serving and then drive home in order to eat it. And that means that if you wanted more, it would require another trip to the grocery store. So you're increasing those response efforts. And that can be very effective. All right, so now I would like you all to pause the PowerPoint again here and go back to the assignments and lecture video section and watch the lecture video on 16 on increasing your response effort. And then you can come back here. Okay, you're back, and I'm going to make you do exactly the same thing again. I'd like you to go back to the lecture assignments and watch the video lecture Frog and Toad with Cookies. But while you're watching, this is a children's book that was actually read every quarter by my dissertation professor, Dr. Edmund Fantino. When he was teaching this class, he would read Frog and Toad to the students every single time he taught the class. So it has some special memories for me. But I want you to think about this idea of antecedent interventions. And I want you to figure out what the antecedent intervention that Frog is trying to implement is. What is he trying to do? And tell me why it's not working. What does he need to do to make his intervention more successful? So go and watch Frog and Toad and tell me what you think the story Cookies, and tell me what you think his antecedent intervention is, why it's not working, and what he should do to make it more successful. And then you can come back for the last little bit of our lecture. Okay, welcome back. The last thing that I wanted to, first of all, did you figure out what Frog was trying to do? What intervention was he using? If you said that he was trying to increase the effort associated with eating cookies, you're correct. He kept trying to make it harder and harder to get to the cookies. But he made a mistake. Why did he fail? If you said that he failed because he didn't establish an alternative behavior, then I would say that you're right. The best way for Frog to have suppressed the cookie eating behavior would have probably been to make a very easy, yummy dinner for himself and Toad, and then the desire to climb the ladder and take down the box and untie the box and get to the cookies would have been much lower. Instead, Frog chose to use a different technique, which is called advanced commitment. Commitment is another antecedent intervention that enhances self-controlling behavior when it comes to behavior change. When you're trying to establish better habits, making a public commitment can really help you to succeed by making you use antecedent controls. So what Frog did was he made the commitment to not eating cookies by inviting birds to eat the cookies instead. And as a result, no one is going to eat the cookies. With respect to, and I love that story. Okay, so with respect to advanced commitment, there are 3 basic rules. First, you need to make the commitment in advance. So the commitment to not bring home the ice cream, to the commitment to work on the motivating operations, making the desired behavior more motivation to do the desired behavior, and abolishing operations to decrease the behavior. Doing all of those antecedent things in advance and making that commitment public, whether you do it on Facebook, whether you do it in a classroom setting like we've done, and tying real, true, meaningful contingencies and consequences to your behavior. So commitment works really well. The best example of commitment are those people who put their alarm clocks across the room so that they have to get up and out of bed in order to turn it off. By doing that in advance, it's a lot easier to commit to it, and it is, once it's done and you've gone to bed, it's easier to comply with the appropriate behavior. Once you're out of bed, it's easy to stumble down the hall and wash your face and brush your teeth, and then you're up and ready to go. So advanced commitment is another antecedent intervention that can help you engage in the desired behaviors that you are trying to accomplish, and to decrease your habits that you're trying to reduce. So with that, this is the last lecture for the next exam, and so we will see you back for the next unit. Good luck on the test.